Wanna feel old? My first ever ranking video where I went over every episode of The Simpsons is almost 6 years old. Okay, that's a lie, but it's still been a while. Now, when I'm discussing every episode of a series that's still releasing new episodes, things are going to get outdated quick. I'm pretty sure The Simpsons aired a new episode like the week after I released that video, immediately rendering it out of date. And with that, I oftentimes find people reaching out and asking me, Mark, why do you suck so much? Do you ever keep up with shows after you're done watching them? And the answer to that is a resounding no. I think most of you can understand that when I subject myself to a month or two of watching one show on loop, I'm not that keen on revisiting it. Ever since my Family Guy, SpongeBob, and Simpsons videos, I've only really gone out of my way to check out a small handful of episodes since. I like South Park, though. An issue with this is that most of these ongoing series reached a point of seasonal rot by the time I was done with them. However, in certain cases, I've seen some folks come out and praise some of the newest episodes of SpongeBob, Simpsons. Not Family Guy, though. And so it got me wondering, is The Simpsons really that good now? I find myself actually enjoying a couple of the brand new SpongeBobs when I briefly revisited it for that video last month. So could I have a similar response by watching the 3 extra seasons of The Simpsons that's released since my video? Like, I've seen some folks out there say that the show right now is the best it's been in like 20 years, and that is a baffling concept to me. When I last caught up, it seemed as if the series had just gotten into a pattern of complacency, doing episodes that were just boring and soulless, filling out their seasons with sequel episodes trying to remind you of when the show was in its prime. So with that, let's talk about modern Simpsons. And by modern, I mean modern Simpsons. I'm not going to be ranking anything or going over every single episode as I'm saving my sanity for an upcoming ranking video. By the way, give me suggestions on what you'd like to see me do next. But I will be talking about each season individually, and highlighting standout episodes that I either think are really good, or really bad, who knows. Also just ways the show's changed in general. I know they got a new teacher now. Also, I was on Twitter the other day and saw I got nominated for a couple cartoon community awards like channel art, video essays, and for my podcast, Meeting Halfway. So if you'd like to vote for me or whatever, check out the little card in the top right and go to their voting website. I really need this, guys. But first, Homer Simpson sure does eat a lot of food, huh? It's like his character trait or something. That's why today I'm glad this video is sponsored by Cook Unity, the first chef-to-you meal delivery service. Cook Unity is a wonderful food delivery service that provides you with a variety of excellent meals so you don't need to go anywhere near a grocery store or spend hundreds of dollars on food apps. Where each week award-winning chefs craft hundreds of globally inspired meals. Meals are delivered fresh and the menu rotates every week, so there's always something new to try. They offer a wide range of meals, with over 7 different dietary preferences filters, including vegan, gluten-free, and many more. As someone who primarily eats food consisting of chicken tenders and chicken nuggets, I was pleased to see just how many different options I was given based on that request. I was personally a big fan of the chicken thigh with mushroom curry and rice, the cheesy keto chicken parm bowl, and especially the Mexican pulled chicken bowl. The subscription is also super flexible, so you can pause, skip weeks, or cancel at any time. Go to the description or top comment, or just type up cookunity.com/LSmark50, or just use the code LSmark50 for 50% off your first week. Why not give it a try? And thanks to Cook Unity for sponsoring this video. Back when I finished that ranking video, The Simpsons was about halfway through its 32nd season, so I figured I'd probably go over what I just missed out on last time. That whole video was a goddamn blur to me now, so I honestly don't even remember what came before, other than a couple episodes here and there. But even then, I think that more than anything speaks volumes as to how forgettable I thought the season was at that point. So did that pull through in the second half? It's about the same level of quality from what I remember. With a few episodes I enjoyed a lot, but also a few I really didn't. With the rest, just like, I watched them a couple hours ago and I couldn't even tell you what happened in them if I tried. They showed movie Sonic the Hedgehog, that's all I retained. Interesting enough, the very next episode that came after my video focused on the death of Edna Krabappel, Bart's teacher. If you weren't aware, her voice actress passed away by this point, and the fact that at this point in the show, Edna was literally living next door to The Simpsons, I think an episode like this was necessary and a really great send-off to the character. Way better than to just act like she was never there at all, I guess. The Simpsons is a very cynical series, but some of my favorite moments from it often show the sweeter, more emotional sides to the characters, and this episode is no exception. The stuff with Bart reading her diary and thinking she believed he had potential, and so he starts doing all this good stuff only to find out she was actually talking about her cat, I think dragged on too long. You could immediately tell what direction it was going to go in, and felt a little contrived as to why this diary would impact his life so much, but he apparently didn't even bother reading very far into it to get the reveal. But that ending where Bart talks with Flanders followed by his ending scene really tied it all together well. This latter half of the season has a big focus on characters supposedly having some big secret life outside of The Simpsons. Which I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, probably just a result of there being such little to do with these guys at this point. But most notably, we get an episode where we find out that Moe is part of a secret bartender society where they share their patrons' secrets. Grandpa is tracked down by a British spy because he thinks he's also a spy. And most bizarre of all, an episode starring Sarah Wiggum. You know, that classic character. I like how much they acknowledge that this character has done literally nothing substantial throughout the entirety of the show, but at the same time, it feels like their only idea for making her interesting was to make her an entirely different character altogether. Even in how she talks, they replaced her voice actors from this point on, I think, which is strange because her previous one is also the voice of Milhouse, so it's not like she went anywhere. They reveal that she actually had this cool, epic past where she was a criminal. Her old partners in crime coming back to have her pull off one more heist with them. Not gonna act like I'm some massive Mrs. Wiggum stan, who's so appalled that they would severely change her character like this. If anything, I completely understand the approach of taking a character who hasn't done anything before and actually trying to make them interesting, but this to me just came off as a super lame attempt at making you care about a once innocuous character. Like, you thought Mrs. Wiggum was boring? Well, guess what? She's actually a cool, seductive stealth action hero.
Just look at that long ponytail. Now we're talking.
I don't know, it probably could have worked well, but I think it's mainly brought down by how fast the pacing is. These episodes feel like they're going at a mile a minute, which was hard to adjust back to since I've only really watched a handful of classic era episodes in the past few years, so the change in tone was really jarring. Episodes like this more often than not feel like they never get the chance to explore the new concepts they're opening up because they're stuck between juggling 2 to 3 plotlines at once. And because of that, none of them are allowed to breathe. Like, Marge has no real reaction to finding out Miss Wiggum has been living a lie after the initial reveal, and suddenly it's all cool with her and she's along for the ride. And they make a big deal about her husband Clancy, you know, him being a cop and all. Him and Homer going through their own storyline of learning to appreciate their wives more for the 100th time. And then you think this is gonna build up to some big reveal, where Clancy either finds out he's married to a criminal, or she finds some way to cover it up, reverting back to her boring background NPC self. But no, we get neither. This pacing issue plagued the entirety of the season. The series has started focusing a lot more on fast-paced gags, usually disconnected from the plot. And while they've always done this, I can't help but feel like they used to focus on building off one joke over and over again, until it naturally unravels into this way bigger moment. But at times here, it can be in the level of Family Guy.
There's a bee in here! How the crud should we get through that thing?
I've seen my dad do this.
It's the meme! They know about the meme! Again! And again. And again.
But it turns out you hate everything!
This different approach to comedy certainly isn't a bad thing, but I can't help but wish that even if they were gonna keep up this quicker pace, they would at least give their episodes the room to just end in a satisfying way. They had one that I thought really could have been great about Homer's obsession with these Chuck E. Cheese knockoff animatronics from his childhood. I remember when this episode came out, and I think it was like Al Jean or someone made a joke tweet about the fact that with the show's moving timeline, Homer is now a teenager in the 90s, and all these people who didn't know he worked on the show just came flooding and shitting all over it. Poor guy. Dude, they had an episode where it took place 6 years in the past, and it still featured the characters using Uber. That was a fucking moment for me right there. Okay, a last timeline thing, but I really like how they had the balls to call out animation studios for hiring celebrities that become outdated by the time of release, and then later in this season have a future episode where Bart plays Fruit Ninja. Just keep throwing those stones, Simpsons. Okay, ironically with all these tangents, I'm talking about pacing, so let's get back to it. The Pizza Bot episode sees Homer rediscover these robots from his childhood and feels a loss of innocence in them no longer being in his life. And so the family try to gather them all up. This is then completely sidetracked when J.J. Abrams enters the picture because he wants to make a movie about them. This then greatly upsets Homer as his reimagining isn't anything like how he remembered them being. And so the episode now focuses on Homer being some fat neckbeard crying about how his childhood is ruined. Just the fact that the show's gone on so long that we now have Homer into the stuff Bart would have been into at the start of the series, so weird to think about. I can see where they're going with this, and that's not a bad idea. But in execution, the whole thing goes by so fast that you can't help but start thinking about all the ways this plot wasn't thought through enough. Like, they're making a big point about how just because something is important for your childhood doesn't mean somebody can't come in and remake it in their vision. That now a whole new generation can grow up with something, even if it's not exactly how you remembered. That would be fine, but J.J. Abrams' character is approached so cynically that you can't help but be on Homer's side. Like, this isn't presented as Homer realizing Mr. Abrams also had a fascination with these characters when he was a kid, and simply giving his interpretation of them. It's presented as a business venture for him that just suck his dick the whole time, talking about how perfect he is at storytelling. There's no real passion there. And so in that case, I think Homer is pretty reasonably upset when he and his trolling group are meant to be seen as the unreasonable ones. They also try to make a point that anyone upset about these sort of reboots are only projecting their crappy childhoods onto this thing. You know, Homer's real issues came from his dad. But Grandpa has about 30 seconds of screen time before this moment at the end of the episode. It feels like a lazy approach to commenting on the topic of fandoms that's been done a million times. Which especially sucks when you know this same premise could have been handled way better if given the time to actually flesh this out. You know, focus on Homer, not fandoms as a whole. This started off as his personal story. But there's not even any payoff to the episode because it just ends. They've pretty much cut the intro out of the show entirely. I don't know why they run out of time so much. My favorite episode of the season would probably have to be Panic on the Streets of Springfield, which is shocking considering it's a Lisa episode. It features her becoming obsessed with this British singer who has an extremely sardonic attitude towards everything, to where she starts to adopt that same personality. She even personifies this growing part of her with an imaginary version of the singer following her around and influencing her. There's like this whole dumb side plot of Homer buying a giant truck to fix his testosterone and arguing with Marge the whole time, which I assure you is hilarious. And I wasn't really a fan of how simple the ending was. See, I really like them showing a version of Lisa that's leaning more into her know-it-all personality, starting to get joy from putting others down. But the ending just shows her meeting the real musician and finding out that he's racist. Well, of course she can't like him now. It just feels too easy. Like, I don't know, what if she met the guy, ready to have someone embrace her newfound attitude, only for the guy to be nice now and regret how he's acted in the past? They make a big deal to point out that the version following Lisa around is one from years and years ago. So what if we have him be the one to tell Lisa that in the long run, this kind of attitude isn't gonna get you anywhere? It's not a huge deal still, I liked the episode, but, you know. My least favorite, however, without a doubt would have to be Yokel Hero, where Homer becomes Cletus's music agent and he hits it big in Hollywood.
Done. We got 2 more acts.
He abandons his family and eventually fires Homer as his agent for a bigger, more successful one, until he's reminded of what he's pushed away with his newfound fame. It's like AI wrote it. I literally think that The Simpsons already did an episode where Lisa tried to get Cletus's kids famous. It's not that different. It's so by the books, too. Literally, just the sight of his kids is enough to snap him out of his fame-hungry mindset. And then it's over. Cool. Overall, Season 32 definitely didn't have any episodes in its latter half that I would deem bad. Okay, maybe the Cletus one. But it certainly doesn't change my mind on what I've seen before. It was just kinda more of the same. So I'm really curious what these brand new seasons are gonna hold for us. Let's find out if we've got a Simpsons renaissance on our hands. Season 33 begins in possibly the most bizarre way it could, with a musical episode of all things. A musical episode all about Marge. So as you could probably guess, they immediately change her voice actress anytime she sings.
The cast said yes, we're putting on a musical.
Poor Julie Kavner, everyone acts like she's got a gun to her head when doing the Marge voice, forced to do it against her will. It's a good episode and all, I like a lot of the songs, but I couldn't help but wonder if this thing was intended to be a musical parody or not. They have a lot of songs where the lyrics are extremely overt and mocking the kind of tropes present there, but I can't tell if that's because this is a parody or if it's just the Simpsons' usual writing style coming through, because there are just as many songs that seem pretty sincere. Either way, it was a solid opener. You know what I miss though since we're talking about music? I miss when The Simpsons had a really good score. Now this isn't exclusive to this season, it's been the case for decades now, but something that really elevated many of the best Simpsons episodes to me would have to have been the soundtrack. Even stuff like the movie, which I don't like very much, I think has an excellent score that increases the impact of their scenes tenfold. I know an orchestra soundtrack isn't possible for every episode unless you're Family Guy, but I don't know, I guess I miss how much the soundtrack added to the show. Oh yeah, I also gotta talk about the new Treehouse of Horror, which I'll admit were never my favorite episodes from any season, but I don't know, it's just to the point of being direct movie parodies. I liked when these things at least pretended like they were trying to be scary.
Lousy Treehouse. Every year, 3 scary stories. 2 of them good and a lame one in the middle.
The first is a parody of the movie Parasite, where they don't really do much other than simply retell the events of the movie in a fraction of the time before falling apart by the end. The second was clearly just done because of the title. Now it's a literal Treehouse of Horror, because trees take over the earth. And finally we have The Ring, but with TikTok. Would have much preferred they extended out that short segment with the way more interesting art style, but oh well. They make an effort in this season to actually find a permanent replacement for Edna, and so we get a whole episode dedicated to the fact that Bart may like her and is super awkward around her. This one was hard to get through, I gotta be honest.
Alert! Alert! Shutting down! Self-destruct!
I can understand the approach of trying to make her as different from Edna as possible. Probably opens more story opportunities for Bart to have a new dynamic with his teacher. But they went so far with it that I can't help but wish that she were more of a character. She's just kind of presented as being perfect, which is strange because literally every single other teacher in the school is consistently shown to be miserable and depressed. Whereas she comes into the picture as this super teacher who literally everybody loves. Doesn't make me not like her, but I think with Edna's character, what made her so much more interesting was that you couldn't envision her being outside of a school setting. Sure, she was the teacher, and that's how a majority of her roles in episodes were filled. But when they did focus more on her life outside of the school, it was just as entertaining as with any other character in Springfield. She was a person before she is Bart's teacher. But I know it took a couple seasons for Edna to be more fleshed out, so who knows, maybe I'll come around to her eventually. Something I definitely did start coming around on were actually the two-parter episodes of all things. They had begun doing these around the time my ranking video was ending, and I don't think I was ever really a fan of any of them. I remember they had one about the town getting a new priest and a Great Gatsby parody, neither of which felt like they needed to last 45 minutes. So thankfully season 33's attempt at Serious Flanders is good. If not feeling a little pointless as it is yet another parody, this time being a non-canon Netflix version of the show. And they accomplished that aspect pretty well. You could make out all the standard beats of one of those serialized Netflix dramas that were hitting right on target, and the storyboarding was especially fantastic. That's something in general worth highlighting. I'd begun to see a lot of praise online for the animation of certain scenes in newer Simpsons, and I tended to believe these were just seldom done, like it wasn't the norm or anything. But I'm not sure if anything changed in their approach or something, because just about every episode now has really great animation. Especially with character acting, their movements are so fluid. It can be a little jarring at times because The Simpsons has been so stiff and rigid for so long, and I wish they had played with the characters way more like the musical episode animated Homer unnaturally fluidly at times. Like early on when they would do that, it would generally be to emphasize his expressions or his body language, but here they're still afraid to play around with the models too much, which can create a bit of disconnect with their movements. But still, generally all around, massive improvement. Serious shout out to the animation team behind these. I guess my only issue with a Serious Flanders isn't even really the fault of the episode, and more so, just like, doesn't feel like The Simpsons. That's by design, I know, but I would like to see them try and tell a two-parter again someday that actually feels like the show I'm coming for. The musical episode had that similar issue where it was stuck between being a parody and genuine. It doesn't help that Marge is voiced by some celebrity, it really doesn't feel like an episode of the show. But still, I will take what I can get. There are a load of good episodes in here. Season 33 also marks the return of the return of Mona Simpson, Homer's mother who died like 20 years ago, yet they keep trying to do more with her. I can never get invested in these retreads. Not only because with his mother being missing ever since he was a kid, it results in them having to jump through all these hoops to find ways for him to actually have seen her at points in his life. To me, it also kind of dampens the impact of the previous episodes like Mother Simpson, which showed Homer to be someone who went his whole life believing his mother was dead, only to finally reunite with her, only to lose her once again. It's sad. But here they establish that, no, Homer knew that his mother wasn't dead the whole time, and actually briefly met her when he was 16. But it was so brief that it makes me wonder what the point in any of this was. It causes the moment where it's shown she was actually present for the birth of Bart feel phony. Like they were trying to recapture that same magic that was Mother Simpson's finale. Because this episode has had nothing to do with the birth of Bart or even Homer at that age. Maybe if it did, this would have been all the more satisfying. Maybe have it revolve around the period in Homer and Marge's life right before Bart was born. Focus on Homer worrying that maybe he isn't fit to raise a kid because of how messed up his own childhood was. I don't like doing that, you know, if they'd just done it this way, my version is better. And again, this isn't a bad episode, just comes off pointless to me. Speaking of pointless character returns, they've surprisingly brought back Maya. Remember Maya? That one episode where Mo got a girlfriend, but he screwed it up and then she left him? Now she's back and in love with him again. Then they get married. It's such a weird continuity addition to have Mo suddenly be married, especially when this episode doesn't do a thing to show you why Maya needs to be his permanent wife. She barely even acts like how she did back in season 20, she's just mindlessly in love with him now. This season has a lot more good episodes compared to the last, which I was glad to see. Even some that have more interesting ways of retreading older stuff, like having Lisa meet the son of Bleeding Gums Murphy, that one was alright. But my favorite episode of the season would probably have to be Pixelated and Afraid, which was so good it was nominated for an Emmy. Didn't win, but how many Emmys have you been nominated for? Homer and Marge's relationship had definitely gotten stale for a little while in those middle seasons, going through the same song and dance again and again where he messes up and has to learn how to be a better husband. But oftentimes it fell into the trap that a lot of adult sitcoms fall into where it goes too far at times, like that episode where Homer pins Marge for a DUI. So it's refreshing to see a much more wholesome side to their marriage, them getting lost in the wilderness and having to learn to fend for themselves, growing closer because of it. Not the funniest episode in the world, but the characters more than make up for it. Also, shout out to Lisa's You know what, I'm not gonna say that title, it's horrible out of context. I really liked the episode Lisa's Belly, which shows the internal struggle she faces after Marge makes a small comment about her weight. I thought it was a solid way of conveying how little comments like that can really affect a kid's psyche, and how oftentimes it stems from poor upbringing. Although I wish they didn't wait so long to introduce Marge's own relationship with her mother, really just leaving it to the last scene with them. Sadly, this season also continues the trend of episodes just kinda forcing a conclusion, which is weird because they so frequently have time for these 30-second long ending gags completely disconnected from the plot. Use that time to finish your dang story. My least favorite episode, though, would either have to be Pretty Little Liar or Meat is Murder. Oh boy, another Cletus episode, who could have guessed that would have sucked? It reveals that his wife has actually been living a lie. She's not a hillbilly at all. She's smart. Combines the phenomenal Spuckler episodes with the classic, now they have to stay at the Simpsons house despite not really knowing them that well. They're literally cousins. You cannot expect me 33 seasons in to start caring about their relationship genuinely. Meat is Murder at least started interesting, showing how Grandpa and his business associate were the original creators of what later became Krusty Burger after the clown stole their ideas. And so now they have to team up again to take him down. But it literally just turns into a Succession parody, although these literally are just the characters from Succession, so I'm not really sure where the parody lies. Either way, it got so focused on that I just stopped caring. Turns out it was never even about Krusty, he just wanted Grandpa to vote for him so his kids don't kick him out of his company. Because Succession. Still though, I find myself at the very least somewhat enjoying a majority of what Season 33 had to offer. It's not the drastic improvement I've seen folks claim, but I am starting to adapt to the new, faster style of comedy they're starting to go for. Still doesn't hold a candle to even some of the worst episodes of the early seasons in my opinion, but I can't really expect that from it. Maybe I've just begun accepting modern Simpsons for what it is. So let's just hope Season 34 is able to continue improving upon this.
Marge, fan out those cocktail napkins! Or did you not watch the TikTok I sent you?
Season 34 begins in a pretty mediocre way with Homer trying to find people who appreciate him, which turns out to be this group of local conspiracy nuts made up of yet another random hodgepodge of characters.
I've heard there's a cartoon show that can predict the future. Maybe we can watch it and find out what's going to happen.
It's a shame that this doesn't have the best first impression, because as it continues, I think this is actually the season I've enjoyed the most in a long time. Which is shocking considering we have such inspired concepts as Bart becomes a Roblox grifter, and The Simpsons become internet family vloggers. But no, I actually liked these episodes. The Roblox one just sounds horrible. I will give props for the CG though. But it focuses a lot more on Bart teaming up with Skinner, who wants to put the kids to work selling stuff in the game store to pay for school upgrades. A dynamic we rarely see with the two anymore. I ended up liking it quite a bit. Even if iPads are great, we should allow our babies to be glued to online games is a strange note to end on. The vlogger one I had no hope for. The Simpsons parodying internet trends has rarely gone over well, but this one was so creative in how its story is presented that I couldn't help but like it. We're basically just seeing someone's POV as they get intrigued by the Simpsons family YouTube antics, only to quickly fall down a rabbit hole that reveals the family's many controversies and dark secrets. It was like me trying to look at a Daddy-O-5. They parody so many different video genres that you can't help but see this as some kind of Simpsons writer showcasing a scenario they've definitely gone through before. I love the detail of Lenny and Carl's podcast having each mic be of a slightly worse quality than normal, with mic tapping galore. I feel personally called out. Gotta say, I also liked the Treehouse of Horror as well, which is rare. The first Babadook parody was whatever, but I actually think the latter two are pretty great. The Death Note one purely for the art style shift, this would not have been nearly as entertaining if they just went with their usual, give 'em big eyes, now they're anime look. But the final was definitely the highlight, being this big self-aware Westworld parody where a Homer realizes he's merely a prop in a Simpsons theme park, where fans can come and relive the show's glory days.
Name! Name! Name!
I'm so sick of that stupid hat!
Alright, Simpsons, you've acknowledged it's gotten old, but I'll believe it when I see it. The start also does this fucking perfect recreation of the West Season 10's era looked. Gonna ignore that the episode they're replicating isn't from said era because it just looks so accurate. This season also marks another time in which they've done 2 Halloween episodes, the other being an entire 22-minute parody of the new It movies. Alright, the visuals are good and there's a couple select scenes here that are animated incredibly well, but overall I just don't really see what the point was. Were the new It movies even relevant by this point? Gonna save you the effort of looking that up? No, they weren't. I can see someone liking this, but just repeating the events of a movie, but neither Simpsons characters, never really did it for me. They do yet another experimental episode that did manage to win me over too, and that was Lisa the Boy Scout, which starts off leading you to believe it's gonna be your regular-ass episode about Bart and Lisa going to Scouts, but instead gets hijacked by 2 hackers who want to show you all the clips you were never meant to see. Dude, I saw this one all over Twitter for a while. The episode was trying to evoke how angry fans would get at twists like the one in Principal and the Pauper. And it worked. I like how they're willing to make fun of their own questionable episodes in the past, like the fucking jockey elf shit from like season 10. Something this season is not shy from doing more frequently.
Springfield's darkest chapters be taught. The monorail. Lady Gaga's visit.
This season by far has some of the most outlandish episode concepts in the entire series, but at this point, I don't really care. By the end of my ranking video, I recall just wishing that the show would do something, anything new, even if it detracted from the series' status quo. And these What If episodes are probably the best of both worlds in that regard. I usually don't like non-canon stuff like this, but as long as the show generally still feels like The Simpsons at its core, I don't care, go wild. And it seems season 34 has that same mindset for a lot of these episodes. That still doesn't mean there aren't any that are gonna fall back on their tried and true formulas, with yet another Lisa Future episode. Really didn't need another one of those. This one focuses entirely on a relationship with Nelson, showing how much they lost track of and eventually reconnected with each other throughout the years, always on the verge of getting together. It's definitely better than the college one from last season, but I don't know. It's kinda missing the payoff needed for me to get anything out of this constant will they, won't they. Again, this issue has plagued most of these episodes of Modern Simpsons, but there's never any room for a conclusion at the end that isn't just 1 or 2 lines. They're both at their friend's wedding, Nelson gets overwhelmed seeing Lisa again and runs outside, and without any real convincing, she realizes she should be with Nelson. She tells him that, and then it's over. Likely never to be revisited again. Or who knows, maybe they'll come back to it in season 64 if the episode Pin Gal is anything to go by, which gives us the return of one-off character from all the way back in season 1, Jacques, who, if you don't remember, tried to seduce Marge while being her bowling instructor. This time he's back to try and seduce her while being her bowling instructor. Truly a grand return. They don't really give Marge any reason to want to leave Homer here. He's arguably as supportive as ever. She's better than him at bowling, but he doesn't even care. He's proud of her. Yet we still need to have that scene of Homer exclaiming how he needs to appreciate his wife more, even though that's all he's been doing here. There's no winning for the poor guy. My favorite episode of the season would have to be Bartless. Yet another What If episode. And it's not just my favorite because of the gorgeously animated Itchy and Scratchy segment. With Bart yet again getting in trouble, Homer and Marge start to feel guilty and concerned over the idea that if Bart weren't their own kid, they wouldn't like him. And so we see a world in which they never had him. And what do you know, they're rich and successful. Could have been really easy to make this one super mean-spirited, like that one Fairly Odd Parents episode where Timmy realizes everybody's life would be better without him. But no, instead Marge and Homer run into an orphan Bart who has nowhere else to go. And we see them bring him in, and while initially bothered by his antics, the family comes to start liking having him around and eventually want to make him a part of their family. Him bonding with them, especially Homer and Lisa, were really sweet, and it results in a heartfelt episode that reminds you of why these guys work so well as a family, how they all bring something in their own way, and without one, the rest would feel incomplete. My least favorite, however, hostile Kirk place, no doubt. Kirk Van Houten finds out that Springfield has been teaching the kids about how badly his ancestor fucked up as mayor, making his whole family look bad. And it just turns into this big social commentary about him riling people up to overlook the negative parts of history, and to pretend they never happened. It's so on the nose with what they're going for that Kirk literally becomes ruler of Springfield, turning the place into Germany. I thought this was a dream sequence or something at first, but no, this really happened, and it's just lame. Ends on this big message about how if you ignore history, then it's bound to repeat itself, like, thanks, Simpsons, I'm not 4. This obvious message completely overrides the episode that Kirk doesn't even get any kind of conclusion or reprimanding. He just screws up the same way his ancestor did. Homer says, history repeats itself. Then it just ends. Kirk wasn't even the one to give this dang speech. Still though, this was a bad episode in what's otherwise an incredibly solid bunch. I liked the majority of what season 34 had to offer. Shoutouts to Carl Carlson Rides Again for finally doing something with Carl that actually focuses on his character. Also, I figured I should just throw it in here, but the show recently aired the first episode of its 35th season, and meh. Felt like a more directionless version of Homer's Odyssey, which already wasn't great. Homer wants to find more purpose in his life, and so becomes a crossing guard, only to let this power go to his head and the whole thing completely loses that simple beginning. Like his power trip isn't even something he puts on himself. Other characters just start telling him to act that way and he goes along with it. Only to become this big thing about him versus the police versus the mayor versus all these other groups, and I just stopped caring. But don't let that negative ending note confuse my thoughts on Modern Simpsons, because for once, I am really hopeful for the future of the series. Will it ever reach the heights it once had in its prime? Probably not. But I think now, I'm okay with that. Because as long as they're consistently pumping out solid episodes like the ones I've seen in season 34, then I'd say the series is in pretty good hands right now. And who knows? Maybe I'll actually go back to keeping up with it. Don't want to get too ahead of myself here. But point being, if you were like me and had gotten seriously drained of The Simpsons, maybe check out some of the episodes I've highlighted. Because they're pretty good and I couldn't be happier. Alright, how long until this video becomes immediately outdated with a new episode? Oh, today? Cool.